Ever since I started playing role-playing games, I've been itching for that Helm's Deep moment. That moment where my party of adventurers makes a desperate last stand against overwhelming odds in a no-holds-barred battle. But no matter what I've tried, it's never worked.
Why isn't it possible?
It's just not.
Why not, you stupid bastard?
The reason it doesn't work is simple. You're playing with the wrong group for it. You have to remember what D&D is, where it comes from. It was an offshoot of Wargames for the kind of players that wanted more focused and minute storytelling. And that splinter fostered its own culture and community, its own rules, and most importantly, its own expectations. Now, remember what a wargame at its heart is, not what it feels like, what it actually is. It's you and your opponents moving groups of soldiers around a battlefield and rolling dice to see who wins, complicated by endless special rules that slow the whole thing down to a crawl, but give it the depth that people go to wargames for. Like, for instance, you're gonna have a lot more fun if your Viking troops have some sort of reckless aggression trait, but that's gonna have you looking into a book. You're gonna have a lot more fun if your samurai have some sort of stoic honor that gives them more power, some Bushido, but that's gonna have you looking in the book for that special rule about, like, how does the Bushido honor work? Oh, it gives me a +1 to morale check, so they're not gonna run? Fantastic, but that stopped you from playing. That's what wargaming is. D&D is already bloated with rules. You're lucky to find a party that knows how their own character works, let alone the general rules for the game. And that's what you're there for, right? They just want to roleplay and kill stuff.
Different units have different sizes. So the infantry units are size 8, which effectively means they have 8 hit points. The archers have 6, the cavalry have 4. And if you get to half health, that's when you start making morale checks because half your number's been killed, right? So your unit could actually inflict a casualty if you get above their defense by 10 or more. You inflict double casualties. If you hit a nat 20, it's doubled again.
Sweet. Very cool. So
I remember watching my favorite season of Dimension 20, A Crown of Candy, where Brennan runs a massive battle for his players. And in all honesty, it goes pretty great. But if you watch closely, you can tell that most of the players aren't engaging with the mechanics of the battle itself, instead focusing more on the role-playing and actions that their character can do, leaving the tactics to the DM and also Brian Murphy, who, surprise, is also a DM. And I'm gonna come back to that later. Now, if you're like me, you're already slamming your keyboard saying, well, actually, my group that's been playing since the 80s has a really good grasp of the rules. Congratulations. I'm sure that your group that's been playing since the 80s also hates D&D by now and has been badgering you to play Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Burning Wheel, or Fatal. You should probably check in with them if that's what they're wanting to play. The point is, the vast majority of players have learned enough of the D&D rules to get by, and that's enough for them. And fair dues too. D&D is pretty complex as role-playing games go, which is unfortunate since it's most people's first and only one, so they're going to assume all role-playing games are just that complex. What I'm saying to you is trying to tack on any amount of new rules or mechanics is a Sisyphean task. You are rolling a boulder of rules up a hill towards the summit of role-playing Valhalla, but I'm here to tell you to just let that rock roll all the way downhill and walk up the hill without it. Let me put my money where my mouth is and tell you what happened during my attempt to add a war element to my game. We were playing Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden, and my players managed to take over a fortress at around the midpoint of the game. One of the players also had a noble background, so they leveraged their new position and public goodwill from ousting the threat from the fortress to start a kingdom. Well, I was all about that, so the Kingdom of the Wolflands was born, and I went sicko mode creating the mechanics for running their fledgling state. It basically ended up being a cosmic gumbo of mechanics from Matthew Colville Colville's Kingdoms and Warfare rules, mixed with the role system from Pathfinder Kingmaker and the decision system from the board game The King's Dilemma. I had each of the players design a custom unit for their army and had each of them take up a political position in the kingdom, whether it was general or diplomat or chancellor, and each of them got to pick one of their favorite NPCs to be their lieutenant or their second, taking up the mantle of leadership while they were out on adventures. So, of the things that worked, the players loved making a custom unit. That was easily their favorite part. But the council system devolved our D&D sessions into basically a Zoom meeting where we discussed the merits of various economic initiatives. Now, me, I'd eat that shit up, but I could tell my players were chomping at the bit to just go kill stuff. So, one of the first major threats they faced was a Goblin Raider faction, based on a quest within the Frostmaiden book. Basically, I turned this one-off encounter into a whole faction that they had to contend with. The players managed to defeat the Goblin threat in a very fire and brimstone way, which gave me Daenerys vibes that I hoped would bear fruit later. And they did in some ways, but not in others. But that's a story for another time. The main problem began to rear its head during the battle. Most of the players had no idea what to do during it. I tried to give them the basics and provided them with the rules to check beforehand, but let's be realistic. Less than half of them even opened the PDF. And with hindsight, I totally get it. Expecting non-wargamers to read a wargaming rules manual when most of them haven't even read the player's handbook is way too big an ask. This is no shade to my players, most of them actually have read the Player's Handbook and all the other D&D books besides, but they do that to get ideas for cool characters they can run within the scope of what D&D typically prescribes. Asking them to learn a whole new game just didn't work. After attempting one more campaign against some uppity dwarves in their kingdom, I put the whole kingdom management system on autopilot, and ran 2 more dungeons to finish out the campaign with what meager rocket fuel we had left. So, what did we learn? If you know me, you know I love rules. I'm mad for them. If I was at your table and you wanted to add a wargaming element to your game, I'd be so down. I'd be so down, in fact, that I would probably annoy you with suggestions for how to improve it. But that's it, right? You need a whole table of me's in order to make that work. You need a whole table full of dungeon masters. Brennan and a whole bunch of Brian Murphys. You saw that I tried Matthew Colville's wargaming rules, and they're about as tight as can be and perfectly functional. And when I brought them to my table, they crashed and burned, for the exact reason I've already laid out. People are here to roleplay and kill monsters. Anything you put in front of them during a game of D&D that isn't that is going to fail miserably. Believe me when I say that it kills me to say all this. There is nothing more that I want in the world than a perfect melding of D&D and wargaming. And I know that it's possible to run a game like that, where it's fun, but the group required to do that would be pretty rare. So rare that you'd have to find them online. Wait a second, hey, that's you! Well, if you're so inclined, I recommend getting in the comments and connecting with other like-minded people who've been itching to get a game of D&D that has a war system with strong strategic and tactical elements in it. Now, this is just for D&D. There are other systems that I've been researching, but have yet to actually run that have a focus on war. One in particular that's top of my list to try is a game called Gubat Banwa, which is a Southeast Asian-inspired martial arts tactics and war tabletop RPG, and it's based actually on D&D 4th edition. You can also just add a role-playing element to any real war game that you play in a campaign format and add some sort of like United Nations element to it. Loads of mega games do this, and if you want to lose friends at the same rate as a Mario Party game, you could try this with the board game Diplomacy. If you have any RPG, war game fusion recommendations, please let me know. I'm desperate. My current homebrew build of war in D&D uses the Song of Ice and Fire war game, since it's so evocative and character-focused, even allowing non-combat characters to shine as important to the battle. But more realistically, my battles in my ongoing D&D campaigns will be simulated off-screen using Total War Warhammer 3, which is going to be the subject of an upcoming video. Stay tuned. I'm Bernard. If you want to see that or anything more from me, be sure to subscribe and watch this video here while you wait. See ya.